project I want to share with you today, but I want to give you a little background of this project. Now, in a recent video, I showed you these little mug rugs that I made using a fabric line called Pure and Simple by Ben Artex. And I wanted to do another quilt project, and I had a couple thoughts about this quilt project. So one of them was I wanted to use all the fabric that I had. I wanted to use what I had, and I had about 11 yards of the Pure and Simple coordinating fabrics, as well as a cake layer. And I thought, I'm going to do a project with that fabric line, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to try to use it all. If I can, and if I have enough, I want to even do the back in the fabric, because really my goal lately has been not to buy very much quilt related stuff, especially fabric, and really use what I have, because as you know, we all have so much, and I'm really trying to stick to that. Now I'm not saying I do it 100% of the time, because I do buy some new fabrics, but it's much less than I have purchased in the past. So I decided to make a quilt, and it's going to be a pretty big quilt because I have 11 yards plus this cake layer. So I had this project that I had done, and then I had this super cute table runner with the white stars on it using a charm pack. And I thought, well, maybe I could make something using the package in a quilt or the star. And at one point I thought, well, it would be nice if I could use both of them. But I really decided that I would just enlarge the package. And I would just use the package here, just enlarge it so it could be used with a cake layer. Now, at first I just used the package, and then I sent a picture of it to 3 of my friends. We kind of have a little group chat that is kind of ongoing. All of us have been friends for a long time. And I'm like, well, what do you all think? And they liked it, but they all thought it needed something else. So I have to tell you, my friend Fern came up with this really neat idea. She's like, Michelle, why don't you float the package in a star? So that's exactly what I did. I floated the package in a star, and it really turned out pretty cute. So, and then she said, and you could snowball the corners, because you know snowballing always creates a secondary design, so I've snowballed the corners. Now, so far I just have this one block made. Now my plan is all laid out, and I've got a lot of the pieces cut, but this video is just the first in a 1 to 3 part series. In fact, I have another project using this fabric line that I might, actually maybe a couple more, because I really want to use all of this fabric. But anyway, so this is the first part. This is the first part of this series, and I'm not sure yet how many parts are going to be in this series. So I don't know, maybe you just want to quilt along with me. Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to make this block. Now this block is big because these are 10-inch squares from the cake layer. So let's get started, and I'll show you how I've done this. Okay, so let me show you how I got started. So I guess it all started with this collection. This is the Pure and Simple fabric Christmas line from Ben Artex that I bought years and years ago. And again, I had about 11 yards all together, and then I had a cake layer of the entire collection. Okay, so then here's the little diagram I used to make these. And these blocks right here. But I wanted to be able to use these blocks with a cake layer. So I had to enlarge my package to be a 10-inch square. The final package is going to look like this. Okay, well actually this one has to be trimmed down a bit, but so I just redrew my diagram and redid the math so that this would turn out to be 10 inches. So I could pair it up with 10-inch cake layers. Okay, now let me show you what you're going to need. So for the package, you're going to need 2 pieces for the package. That's these. These are 3.5 by 6. You're going to need 1 piece for the ribbon, which is 2.5 by 6. And you're going to need 2 3-inch squares that will make the bow. Okay, so the bow is going to be like that. Then for the base for the bow, you're going to need 1 3.5 by 5.5. Then for the sides, I don't know where the other side piece is. I bet I've dropped it somewhere. You're going to need 2 by 3-inch pieces. Then to go around the outside here, you're going to need 2 1.5 by 8.5 inch pieces, because this right here, just the package alone will come out to be an 8.5 inch block. So you're going to have 2 1.5 inch by 8.5 inch. Then for the top and the bottom, you're going to have 2 1.5 by 10.5 inch pieces. Now this block does turn out to be 10.5 inches, and I trim it down to 10 inches. If you want to, you can calculate how much you would need to be if you don't want to trim it down, but I wanted to trim it down so it's just a perfect 10-inch square. And that's common. A lot of times people will make it larger and trim it down to the exact size, and that's how I wanted to do these. Now let me show you what you're going to need for the star. Okay, so for the star, you're going to need 9 10-inch squares. Now you don't have to use a cake layer. You can use just scraps if you want. This can be totally scrappy. It doesn't have to be Christmas, but with the package it kind of makes sense to use a Christmas line. But you can use red and green scraps if you want. Throw a little blue in there if you want. Throw different shades of red, different shades of green. But so you're going to need 9 of those. Then for these, since this is a 10-inch square, you are going to need 5 1/4 inch squares. And you're going to need 8 here, and then you're going to need 1 in each corner to snowball the corners. So you're going to need a total of 12 5 1/4 inch background blocks to make the backgrounds here, to make the star, and to do the snowballing. Okay, so let's get started making the package block. Okay, now I've changed this up just a little bit from the way I did this in the original video. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to sew the pieces together like this to make your package. You're going to sew that together, and then you're going to take it and you're going to press it. So that's pretty straightforward, and that makes the base of your package. Then I'm going to show you a little trick kind of how I make the bow. Now, in my other video I just drew a line, but I just decided to press them. I think somebody showed me that years ago. I just never really practiced that, but I decided to do it on this. And so you just fold that in half, and I give it a good press with the iron, pin it down, and then I'm just going to sew. I'm going to sew right there, right on that fold line. That's my sew line. But because I wanted to save this square here, I also sewed half an inch away from here and then cut right down the middle. So let me show you on the sewing machine how I'm going to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have this pinned. I have my square pinned here, and I'm just going to sew right down there. I'm going to sew right on that line. Do a little back tack. Okay, then I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to use the edge of my walking foot because I know that's a half an inch, and this is on the side I'm going to trim away, and I'm just going to sew a half of an inch away from there. And the reason I'm doing it like this is because I want to save this little piece for another project. So when I trim this off, I'm going to have a half square triangle already made. Okay, so I'm just going to take this, I'm going to press it good. Then I'm going to trim it, and I'm going to fold this back and press this. Just like that. And then I'll add my other square. Okay, so let me show you how this is going to work. Okay, so there's my sewn piece. I'm just going to take this, lay it on my line. Okay, so then I have a little half square triangle that I can press and use for another project. And then I have the other part of my bow. Now I'll take the second square, and I'm going to do the same thing to it to create the package for the bow. Okay, so now I have those pressed out. Oh, there's that other piece I was looking for. It's stuck to my arm. So here's the bow. And then you're just going to take these side pieces and sew them to this piece. And then once this top piece is done, you'll just flip it down and sew it to this piece that you've sewn. And then that will make your package, and your package will look like this. Your package is going to look just like that. Now this piece right here will measure 8.5 inch square. Okay? And what you do next is you just take your 1.5 by 8.5 inch strips and you sew them on and press them. It'll end up looking just like this. And of course you sew these two pieces just like I showed you just a minute ago together first. And always do good pressing. Sew those sides on. Then you're just going to take your top and bottom pieces, pin those on and sew those. And then your block will look just like that. And then that's the package block. Okay, so remember that when you sew the 1.5 inch strips on here, this leaves your block at 10.5 inches. So I want this trimmed down to be a 10-inch square block, so it'll match up just perfectly with my 10-inch squares. So I'm just going to trim this down to 10 inches. And you're going to cut about 1/4 off on each side. Now, if your seams are a little bit bigger, which sometimes mine have a tendency to be a little bit bigger, you may not be trimming off a full 1/4 inch. But I just really like to make the outer edge just a little bit bigger, so I do come up with just a really perfectly square 10-inch block. Okay, and then there you have it. There's your 10-inch square that's going to match up perfectly with your trimmed 10-inch cake layers. Okay, so the next thing that you might want to do is just take your package, put it up on your design wall, and then just put your 10-inch squares in whatever arrangement you want them. Now, when I use a pre-cut, I do trim these down to 10 inches because I find that it seems like on one side they're always a little bit bigger than just 10 inches. So I do trim these down to 10 inches. And then this is an easy way to kind of figure out what it's going to look like. Now I told you you needed 12 5 1/4 inch background squares, and you're just going to take them and you're just going to press them in half. I did that again instead of drawing all the lines. And then you're just going to put these on just like you did with the little package I just showed you. And that's how you're going to make the star. Then in the corners, you're going to snowball these so you can kind of see how that's going to look. Uh-oh. Let's try another one. That does not want to stick. There you go, just like that. Okay, so let's take a little bit closer look at how you snowball the corners and how you put the start points on. Okay, so the first piece that you put on, of course, you put those right sides together, and I sewed right on the fold line. That's this mark. And then I sewed a 1/2 inch away so that when I trim this, I have 1/4 inch seam on each piece. And this will give me an even bigger half square triangle. And it's already pre-sewed, so I don't have a lot of loose triangles that I'll have to sew later. It's already ready to go as a half square triangle. And I'm going to try to do a little project using all these leftover pieces. So if you're going to do this project, be sure you save these. Okay? Then that will just be pressed back like that. Then once you have this piece pressed back, then you're just going to do the same to the next piece. And I have again sewn right on the fold line. Then I'm going to, so if I'm just snowballing a corner, you just want to put one on. But if you need it for the star points, then you're just going to put on a second one. Trim that. There's your other half square triangle. Those are going to be fun to work with. I love working with half square triangles. And then you'll just take this to the iron and you'll just press that back. And it's ready to put on your quilt. On your block. Okay, so here's the the finished block and you just sew those pieces together. Now this is how I did it. And if you need some help, you can see how I did this in the Star Block table runner, and I'll put a link to that above. So you're just going to take this piece, sew it to this piece. Then I pressed it to the dark. This one sewn to this one. I pressed it to the dark. Then I made this row. I sewed this to this, pressed it inward. This to this, pressed it inward. So then the seams nested well together. And then down here I pressed to the dark, pressed to the dark, and then I added this row to this. And as you can see, it just turns out really nice. It's going to be a fun quilt. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you how I assemble the entire top. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope you'll sew along with me on this project and make one of these quilt tops. You don't have to make it quite as big as I'm going to make it, but I do hope to make it 3 big squares by 3 big squares. And each of these blocks is, I think, right at 28 inches. And so it's going to be a pretty good size quilt when I'm finished, and it's going to be a square quilt. I don't really like square quilts, but it'll be big enough to put on a bed, at least a queen size bed. So that's my plan for this, and be watching for part 2 when I assemble the quilt top. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't. Please share with a friend, and as always, leave a comment. I love to get the comments and try to reply to each and every one. So until next time, have fun quilting.